OECS officials, education officers, national coordinators, provincial education leaders from the OECS, principals, and other special invited guests. Before we begin our deliberation this morning, we will approach the full of prayer and we will reference our Maker. We will begin with a reading of the devotional theme, followed by a song and a short prayer. Our devotion this morning is based on Matthew 11, chapter 28, verse 30. Come unto me, all who are weary and burdened, that I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my yoke is light. You might wonder why I chose this. For the simple reason we have been living with COVID-19 for 2 years now, and I'm quite certain that all the people that here, although you're happy to work with students, you're looking forward to the holidays. So this is just a simple devotion to encourage you to move and to feel strong. The fact is, rest is so hard to come by this, especially for the PEARLE and your teachers. We have felt the strain of the pandemic, but most professionals have had some time. And we're not complaining of anything, but it is so hard to find a some-time, a some-point in teaching. And for that reason, I believe that teachers have been hit the hardest. We've shorted of teachers in some cases, and with a very small budget, we are stretched even thinner than we were before. And that is not to say that when things were 2018 and 2019 that we were going to walk in the park. But this is not what I'm going to say to you today. That Jesus makes life easy. There is a line in the Bible that promises a life without work or hardship. So for me to tell you to rest in Jesus and everything will be fine, it wouldn't only be unhelpful, it's also unscriptural. Here's why Jesus does come. Strength to carry on if you're doing the right kind of work. When he says, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, he also says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. What is the yoke? It's a wonderful power that personal animals so wonderful control by work. Jesus isn't saying, come to me and I will make you break from work. Instead, he is saying, come to me and I will take that yoke of the world that feels heavy and unbearable with my yoke. And instead of letting their job guide them control their emotions and actions, I'll do it instead. And life will be better. When you're spiritual and your body wants to, you're still working, but the work must really go the same way. Alright? I'm still wrapping my head around this idea. And doesn't mean someone working at first told that life is such a hard. But that is the truth. So when we are resting, there is work to love. There are students to teach, parents to have conferences with, school board meetings, PTA meetings, political tension, and not just almost political get part of education in your overseas countries. It's all here, waiting for us, and none of this is. With the weight of the world on your shoulder, sometimes it feels impossible to keep going because, as human it is, you cannot possibly face these problems alone, year after year. It is most definitely break, if not physically, emotionally, break spiritually. So, when you put on your kingdom, find joy in the daily grind. What does it look like? How do we find joy in our results when we are so exhausted? First, pray. Pray for our students. Pray for the co-workers, for the community, and pray for yourself. Ask for guidance. Second, you start replacing the language in your head with words of affirmation. This works for yourself as well as everyone you encounter. Your students, yourself, your administration, your team. They are all children of God. We are all uniquely fearfully and wonderfully made. And we should treat ourselves and others as such. You are on a mission in your school building, and it is to do the work that Jesus would do here. He would love everyone around him. So I had it like this sometimes. Please love everyone around you. By the way, we train ourselves to do that is by first changing our thoughts. Okay? Is that easier said than done? Yes, but it is what Jesus promised. Following me work. There is a yoke, but striving to make a child love in a world that aims to both tear him or her down is much more fulfilling work than getting caught up in the drama, stress, politics, and more. Set your sight on the job Jesus called you to do. I think we all agree that teaching and leading teachers is a vocation, not the one that the world wants you to read. Write the lesson plan. Supervise the teachers writing the lesson plan. Teach them in small groups. Lead by example. Write the emails. But do it through the lens of advancing God's kingdom by filling His word with people who met and were transformed by His grace. That's the real job, and it's one we will be doing. We will not have a song with Alfred Williams, and then we will have a prayer. Good morning to everyone here in the OECS region. Let us all stand and sing together the strong singing. Draw me close to you. Never let me go. And lay it all down again. Today say that I'm your friend. You are my desire. No one else will do. 'Cause nothing else can take your place. To feel the warmth of your embrace. Help me find a way. Bring me back to you. Sing along. You're all I want. You're all I ever needed. You're all I want. Help me know you again. Sing along. You're all I want. You're all I ever needed. You're all I want. Oh, help me know you again. Please help me know you again. Help me know you again. Okay, we will remain standing until we song. We will bow our heads as we pray. Heavenly Father, as we draw nigh to your throne this morning, the 14th of June 2022, and as we sought to liberate the matter concerning early childhood education, just as we invite into your presence,
And what I would like to want to lay hold to your comments that you raised with a before that as what is social work in but in Father, we want to place this entire program into your hands. We want to place the facilitators, we want to place the keynote speaker, we want to place everybody who in one way or another is connected to this program. Especially Heavenly Father, we want to put into your hands the early childhood education leaders who are with us. We want to ask that to help them to refocus, to reflect, to focus, and to renew their aspirations, to renew their strength, to renew their ambitions, that early childhood education will make strides that we foresee it making as we go through the activities that are planned for early childhood education in this year. Therefore, we want to ask that you bless every present instrument, that you bless the speaker, that you bless the stream that this program is being carried out on, that all those here will be enthusiastic about early childhood education, and that they will want to be a part, and they will turn life their own and move along as our country is. Heavenly Father, we want to ask that as we lead this program with all our lofty ideas and our practical activities, that we will remember as our child education leaders, that wherever we go, the parents who come, the students who work, the teachers that we supervise, that we will help them to see God working in us, full of love and compassion, but also full of justice, peace, honor, honesty, and that we will be able to know that you are here, we will know that you are the backbone, and we will also know that even when we rest, that there is hard work to be done, and that everything that we do and we say, every action that we take, will aim towards the betterment of early childhood beneficiaries or future followers. As we move from here and into our schools, we are going to bless us, take and control with all our parents.
Dr. Blaise. Dr. Blaise. Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Diana, for leading us in that inspirational devotion this morning and reminding us that not only are we all gifted, but we must pour to others as well as others do to us, and we must work towards the upliftment of others. That reminds me of why the work we're doing here with the OECS PEARLE here today is so important, where the focus is on ensuring that every learner succeeds. As we know, early childhood education faces tremendous challenges. And despite numerous initiatives and a strong will to have more children participate in early childhood education among the states, we do not yet have full enrollment. Full access has not yet been achieved. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, prior to COVID, an estimated 50% of young children were not participating in ECE. Now with the COVID-19 pandemic, we're seeing that more parents are leaning towards keeping their children at home. And so what does this mean? It means that the pandemic has highlighted the need for a close working relationship between parents and teachers to ensure that education is a priority amongst children. And so we're here today, ECE leaders, we've come together to explore leading practices in education, to reflect on the tremendous strengths in the region, and to consider how to move forward beyond the pandemic. This forum, entitled Reflect, Refocus, and Renew, will provide leaders with the opportunity to reflect on what has occurred over the past 2 years, to share their challenges, and consider how the OECS PEARLE can provide support as they work with educators to serve the needs of the children of their communities, and how OECS PEARLE project activities can be beneficially incorporated into what we're doing with the PEARLE. So today's forum will discuss how we move forward in a coordinated manner that draws a collective benefit from the strengths that exist in each member state. I would like to introduce the Chief Education Officer of the Ministry of Education, Human Resource Planning, Vocational Training and National Excellence, Dr. Jeffrey Blaise, to you to present remarks and words of welcome to the 2022 OECS PEARLE ECE Leaders Forum.
Thank you very much. This is my conference, and as the communication specialist in the OECS Commission. Thank you for an excellent work thus far. And before I proceed, I really want to extend a lot of commendation for the devotion by Ms. Barra and the team. Excellent and stuff. In everything we did, and that was very, very kind. Thank you for that. We need to recognize the permanent secretaries in the Ministry of Education within the member states, the sovereign, the chief education officers, director of education, as well as the member states. Mrs. Simon, who is the director for the OECS EMU, the members of the EMU, splendid team, doing excellent work thus far on our PEARLE initiative. Our district education officers, curriculum officers within the various member states, the national coordinators within the member states, the focal points for the various components of the OECS PEARLE who have been doing an excellent job thus far in ensuring that we are quite timely for implementation. I want to extend a special note to our keynote speaker, Dr. David Bishop, who is from the University of this one got me. But yes, Dr. Bishop, we are happy to have you, and I'm sure that you are going to deliver excellent and substantive information. The moderator, Dr. Chairman Christopher, who is special in education in the Netherlands. Our early childhood educators and our early childhood leaders of education from various member states, they are the leaders. The principals of our various primary schools who are hosting early childhood centers within the member states, other members of the OECS PEARLE team, or invited guests, the media, for live coverage of events, and for the recordings. Without the media, we would not be able to inform the public of the activities that we have been doing as member states on the sub-region. Good morning and welcome, everybody. It is indeed a pleasure and a profound gratitude that I stand here. It is a high initiative. So I'm physically here and I'm virtually in this space. Welcoming everyone, all members participating in the states of the most timely event. Our new focus on ECE has a potential to significantly transform the early childhood landscape of region, and we are grateful that this is the kind of event. We acknowledge that our member states are at various levels of implementation of the ECE programs, and the implementation of the program may be tackled by various challenges within particular member states, and that will be dealt with I'm sure during this event. Notwithstanding, though, we are happy that all member states have seen it important and have prioritized ECE as a main area of focus. This ECE forum, coordinated by the OECS, support from the member states, is based on sharing best practices But more so, it's also based on transforming such practices into policy decisions. And that is important. It's one thing to undertake activities, but it's quite another to implement and implement policy from this. And wherever this happens, you find that you're better able to monitor and to evaluate your indicators for sector growth. And that is important. And I am sure during the implementation of growth, we focus heavily on monitoring and evaluation and looking at our indicators for Economic remain convinced that the development of the education sector and the provision of education and services should not be considered a disjointed activity. We do not want an education taking around from the education and services, but rather we should consider there is a serious growth in provision of education and services and way of treating education. Because the transitioning of students and children is very important when we have cohesive approach. And that is very, very crucial. And that is why, to a great extent, in my presentation, I would just inform some of the advantages we are doing. And if I could do so, because many of these, I'm sure we will do for the development. One of my esteemed that had to college education, and we collected the China bond because she always applied. And I really want to Miss Jordan, excellent job with the team as well. During our deliberations, we deliberated intensive on matters related to education. Ms. Jordan tell me, Dr. Blair, before the students reach primary education, we must pass through somewhere. And that is the child sector. And I always remember that because it's important. Because we can place all our efforts in primary secondary education. At a certain point, we will be making minimal gains. And this probably is a point focus on the must start somewhere before to be. Welcome to this time event. It will be released on the brief summary for 2 minutes. Within the segment of some of the achievements that we have set the tool for policy formulation in the I remember back probably almost 20 years ago, in 2003, we engaged in development of the regulations for the sector. As I remember, in 2003, this really set the framework for early childhood education and the services. In 2005, we established an early childhood council through SR 40 in 2005. And currently we are reviewing the composition of the early childhood council, and that is contributing to the significant gains that we have made over the recent past in early childhood development. So we have recognized that the council has something back then. Needs significant review to incorporate some of the developments we have made in the past few years. In 2010, through the assistance of UNICEF, Dominic became one of our workers, which piloted and adopted the high school curriculum, and the elements started integrated and limits. In 2012, we embarked on a full initiative to expand access to early childhood services, and in so doing we universal ECE, which commences a process of ensuring that our students will be able to access early childhood and that's guaranteed access
and
for
that's
students.
guaranteed
But
access
we
for
recognize
students.
that there were
But
areas
recognize
where
that
we
there
have
were
gaps in terms
areas
of
where there were bit of gaps
ensuring universal access. I think at that point we had
universal
about
access. I think at
94%
that point we had about
of students
94%
access
of
to the
students
childhood
access
education.
to the childhood education.
And this
And
policy
this policy
meant that we had to work
meant
in
that we
groups.
had to work in groups.
One, we had to
One, we had to
integrate
integrate
pre-K in primary
pre-K in the
schools,
primary schools,
and under this
and
policy
under this
arrangements we
policy
made,
arrangements we made,
currently we have 29 pre-Ks, either in standalone next to the primary schools or within the primary schools themselves. We
We
ensure that we
ensure that we
utilize
utilize
available
available
spaces
spaces
within
within
primary
primary
schools
schools
to
to
house
house
the
the
early
early
childhood
childhood
centers, and we
and we
also
also
focus
focus
on
on
developing
developing
appropriate spaces, not just providing the space, but ensuring that the equipment that we put there will develop appropriate so that the ones face spaces and everything else, and to be suited for the little ones. In
In
addition to
addition to
academic
academic
support
support,
our efforts significantly by ensuring that we enhance
enhance
student
students'
capacity
capacity
within
within
the
the
centers.
centers.
So
The
early
early
childhood
childhood
educators
educators
operating from
operating
these
from
29
the
centers
centers,
by
by
and
and
large
large,
would pay
will pay
directly
directly
by the
by the
state.
state.
The policy
Policy
decision
decision
also
also
included
included
the inclusion of spaces for pre-K all
all
new construction and
and
rehabilitation of
rehabilitation of
schools
schools
moving
moving
forward.
forward.
And that
And
was very
that's very
important for
important
us
for us
currently. We
for
have
our
two new school
school
buildings,
buildings.
and
And
either
either
we
we
are completing
rehabilitate
all
all
new
new
construction
construction
where
where
we
we
will put the child spaces
spaces
as part of our
as
policy.
policy.
Additionally, we
Additionally,
are
we
funding
are
assistance
assistance
from
from
the
the
Barrier
Barrier Order
Memorial
Trust
for
for
where we constructed 7 new early childhood facilities in communities where we discovered that there was limited access. So the data shows that there were some communities where we had limited access, and we sought to rectify and bring that challenge. And currently, we can boast that those facilities are fully functional, and students are accessing these. In
in
2014,
2014,
the
the
government
government
adopted
adopted
a
a
policy
policy
decision
decision
to pay
to pay
subvention
subvention
to all
all
early
early
childhood
child
centers that are
centers that are
registered
registered
under
under
the
the
state,
state,
and
and
this assistance included quantum of $1,500
$1,500
for early childhood
for
centers
child
for
centers
pregnant
for
children.
pregnant children.
$2,000 for early childhood centers from 20 to 49 children, and $500 to for early childhood centers with over 50 students. During this period, there was the
During this period, there
establishment
was
of
the
preschool development
establishment of
committees,
preschool development
which
committees, which
really
really
was intended to be a team of
was
persons
intended to be a
within the
team of
community that
persons
would manage
within the
their
community that would manage their
centers in
early
those
childhood
particular schools.
centers in those particular
In
schools.
2016,
In 2016,
there was the institutionalization of the early childhood stimulation program for the
stimulation
European
program.
through this program, we added to the community through training in the high school curriculum for infants and toddlers. And they were deployed to homes where they provided stimulation for children 3 months to 2 years. And that would be the children who would be eventually getting into our preschool. So we sought to prepare those students through our roving caregivers program. In 2020, we engaged the University of the West Indies to deliver a 2-year certificate program for early childhood educators. And many of our early childhood educators benefited significantly from participation in that program. And most recently, we have collaborated with UNICEF, and we have sought technical assistance from UNICEF for the development of our early childhood policy. And we have done the stakeholder engagement process. We are currently eagerly awaiting the first draft of our ECD policy for feedback and ratification and cabinet approval. And that is exciting news for us. We are delighted, as I said earlier, that some of those initiatives will be part of our OECS PEARLE program. And this model of group will definitely mean that we'll move the sector and the sub-region forward in early childhood education. As I welcome all participants to this two-day event, I hope that our deliberations on early childhood matters will pay great dividend. We are all keenly aware that this is a priority for the sub-region, And I'm happy that OECS has sought to divert the human resource and funding to early childhood education. We look forward to sharing the best practices from various member states, but also to avoid the pitfalls, the known pitfalls, because that is the only way in which we can grow as a sub-region. Because if one member state makes a mistake, it's no point allowing other member states to make the same mistake. So sharing of challenges are just important as sharing of best practices. I welcome all participants to this event, and I trust that our deliberations will be fruitful, productive, and at the end of the two-day session, we would have been much better as a sub-region in our implementation of our early childhood program. Welcome, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Bless, for those warm words of welcome and those insightful remarks. It is indeed commendable that member states have prioritized early childhood education. Thank you for sharing the best practices with us, the things that the Commonwealth of Dominica have been doing. I think that it is very commendable that not only has Dominica expanded access through the development of 7 ECE centers, but you've also prioritized building the capacity of your early childhood educators. And so you're quite right when you say we're here to share best practices, but also to learn from the lessons in order to move forward. So thank you again, sir. And I would now like to introduce the representative of the OECS Commission, Mrs. Cicera Simon, Program Director, Education, EDMU.
Okay, a pleasant good morning to all. Good morning to our colleagues joining us virtually, colleagues in Grenada, Dominica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and St. Lucia. Good morning, bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour. Okay, this room is cold. It's like we're there. I know it's raining outside. Colleagues in Dominica, St. Vincent and Grenada, the weather here is one where you need some cocoa tea. So if you can, I'm certain at some time at the break you'll have some, grab some. We're here. Let us wake up. We're early childhood people. Let's stand. Wherever you are, colleagues, please stand. You know, we're the early childhood sector. That's our business. We move, don't we? Yes, we move. So look at the person next to you and give them a jump, give them a high five. Just say hello. Let's do this. Those of us in the virtual space, come on. Yes. Good morning. Good morning to the few gentlemen who are joining us. We are really a sector that it's just so many of us from the female gender, but we welcome our males. And on opportunities like this, we want to tell them welcome. So please take a seat, colleagues. Just felt that in a true early childhood fashion, I needed to do this. It is good to see so many familiar faces here in St. Lucia, and I'm certain if I was in any of the other countries, I would be making the very same statement. How many of you have teenage-aged children? Just raise your hand. Yes. And do you know these days they can be 5 years old and they behave like teenagers, yeah? Yes. Yeah? Yes. So several of us, they like nice things. They know brand. They want Nike. They want Apple. They want the best. Isn't that that so? And the moment we give them anything, they can do something about it. Yeah? All right. So most of our children and even ourselves, we may not own an Apple device or a pair of Nike shoes. We may have been gifted one. Not because we believe that the product is bad. It's because oftentimes we can't afford it. And sometimes we have our priorities. Yeah? So we must choose. In recent times, I took the opportunity to really investigate into some of those brands because I have 2 teenagers at home. And before they ask for anything, they tell me the product, they tell me the brand, and they tell me why I must invest in it. And they are so smart that when they try convincing me, they tell me how this product is going to make a difference in their lives and their learning. So here is what I did. I went to investigate, and you know what I found? Nike has a tagline. Anybody knows it? Yes. Just do it. And Apple has a tagline. Anybody?
I'm Android.
Think different. So this morning, I want us to start off these 2 days of this early childhood forum for leaders with these 2 taglines in mind. 1, just do it. And 2, think different. And I'll tell you why. First, in 2018, an OECS early grade reading assessment revealed that approximately 14% of our early grade students, that's at grade 2 levels, they were reading at their level, which meant that, 4 out of every 10, they were reading at that level. So you know what happened to the other 6. They were not reading at that level. Now I know some of you may be shocked, but that was back then our reality. We anticipate that with the impact of the COVID pandemic, that this situation will be further exacerbated. Secondly, a report in December of 2021 by the World Bank, UNESCO, and UNICEF revealed that younger students had less access to remote learning and were affected by learning loss than older students, especially among the 3 to 4 age group. And this is when learning is very critical, as these are pivotal stages of development. You know, this is the pre-readiness stage to move into that sort of formal education. So in reality, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, many of our children were already experiencing significant learning difficulties, and the impact of COVID did not improve this. The State of the Global Education Crisis, it's a report entitled A Path to Recovery, revealed that, and this is the alarming figure, it revealed that the share of children living in learning poverty before COVID was approximately 53%. So more than half of our children, they were already there, not getting what they needed. And it is anticipated, when you read this report, that approximately 70%, 7 out of every 10 of our children in low and middle income countries, that they would even suffer more. So about it. A child here in any of the OECS countries, at least 7 out of 10 of these children will be greatly impacted. Before COVID, at least 5 out of 10. Post-COVID, now our reality, 7 out of 10. And what was more profound in this report, and it's clearly stated, it was estimated that the learning losses from COVID would cost this generation close to $17 trillion in lifetime earnings. So if you do get a chance, pick up this report, try reading it. It is accessible online. Ladies and gents, colleagues, friends, we are in a crisis. Our bleak reality requires all policymakers, our education leaders, our teachers and our practitioners to think different and do it. Just do it. Do it to improve the lives of our children. Do it to increase access to early childhood education. Think different and invest in the enabling environment to unlock the potential of digital learning opportunities for all our children. To build more of a resilient education system for the long term. Let us do it. I take great pleasure in extending a warm welcome to all to this, the first OECS Early Childhood Leaders Forum. These forums are intended to serve as a build-up to our regional education leaders meeting. This is our opportunity, your opportunity, for us to reflect, to re-engage, to renew our commitments, to rekindle our friendships, network, exchange information, and be inspired. In closing, it has been well documented that education is a critical pillar on which societies are developed, and early childhood education is a critical stage in education development of any nation. And here in St. Lucia, our well-known Nobel laureate, Sir Arthur Lewis, well documented this, and it is a belief that we know, it's a philosophy that we know and we understand that if you build the foundation of this nation, which is our children, we are well on our way. Our children's future and our collective future depends on it. Let us think differently and just do it. Think differently and just do it. Welcome once again. I thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Simon, for that inspiring and truly moving welcoming remarks here this morning. You underscored for us not just data, but you contextualized it for us and reminded us of why what we're doing here is so important, reminding us of concepts such as learning poverty and learning losses. I, for one, was sobered when you mentioned that prior to COVID, 6 out of 10 learners were not at a proper reading level, and what that means post-COVID with these learning losses. So you're quite right when you say 3 to 4, that age group is the pivotal stage, and why what we're doing here today is so important, because we're serving our nations, we're serving our member states, we're serving children, and we are, as Dr. Stephanie Darrow-Barron was saying, we're working towards the upliftment of them. So thank you. We are indeed going to just do it, as you say, and we're going to think different. I would now like to introduce the project manager of the OECS PEARLE Regional Program Management Team, Mr. Rayford Gordon, to present an overview of the program and the forum.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I just wish to acknowledge all of our colleagues online and those in the room and to adopt the protocol already established, particularly considering time. They say it is not how you start, it is how you finish that matters most. But when it comes to education, that couldn't be further from the truth. That couldn't be further from the truth because we know of the overwhelming evidence that an early start, a strong foundation, is so critical to the development of children. It is critical so that we can set up a child for life, for learning, for happiness, for success. Now, Mrs. Simon has given us some outstanding data, some really interesting information to think about regarding that early start. And what we hope is that over the 2 days of our deliberations, of the conversations that we have, that we would stimulate your thinking, inspire you in some way, set the tone for the 2 days of what we hope will be fiery and provocative dialogue with honest introspection and the development of a perspective of where we are and where we need to go to be able to save our children. We wish to achieve the tagline, the goal, the mantra of the OECS education sector strategy, every learner succeeds. And so it brings to mind this beautiful poem by Diane Lumans, that if we, according to Mrs. Simon, just do it and think different, we might avoid the regret that is resonating in that poem, if I had my child to raise over again. Where she says, if I had my child to raise all over again, I'd build self-esteem first and the house later. I'd finger paint more and point the finger less. I would do less correcting and more connecting. I'd take my eyes off my watch and watch with my eyes. I would care to know less and know to care more. I would take more hikes and fly more kites. I'd stop playing serious and seriously play. I would run through more fields and gaze at more stars. I'd do more hugging and less tugging. I'd see the oak tree and the acorn more often. I would be firm less often and affirm much more. I'd model less about the love of power and more about the power of love. And so the beauty of that poem is that while it seems to focus on regret, it really helps us to see what it is that we can do now to avoid those challenges so that we wouldn't have to do it all over again, but that we would be able to save our children even now. And so please permit me a few minutes to just briefly run through the OECS PEARLE to give you a quick summary of what it is that this program entails, what it has to offer, and how it is that it can bring value to you, educators in the various territories. And to also give a very quick synopsis of the OECS, of the program that we're going to see, enjoy for the next 2 days. So, we're having some challenges here. Oh, there it is. So the OECS PEARLE, you've been hearing that name. In case you didn't know, it's the OECS Program for Educational Advancement and Relevant Learning. And within this program, we're focusing on the refurbishment of underutilized primary school classrooms, assistive devices to support the teaching of those with special needs, their standards to guide support and accountability for quality teaching, learning, and leadership. And finally, aiming for learning with a monitoring, evaluation, reporting, and learning system. And so the idea here is that through this program, there will be opportunities, particularly for you to contribute to what we're doing in this sector. And more specifically, as we undertake the refurbishment of 20 spaces in the 4 countries who are the main implementers of this program, we will be providing access to students who initially did not have opportunities to enter an early childhood education center because the parents could not afford it. After refurbishing those spaces, and we hope that many of them would be in primary schools that now can allow with rooms, we know that across the territories, the numbers have been dwindling, we would be able to use those spaces, refurbish them and make them ready and appropriate for early childhood education. They would also be furnished and equipped to be able to meet the needs of these children. Once we've created those spaces, we've equipped them, we need to train people to be able to use them effectively to provide the best quality experience so that these children start off early. We also need to provide support to our leaders. So 80 leaders across the countries will be trained over a period of time through an effective job-embedded professional development course that would allow them to be able to continue to strengthen the Early Childhood Education Center and improve the experiences of our children. And finally, we expect that through your contributions, through the consultations and the dialogue that we spoke about, and if you really do think different, we will be able to contribute to policy development, and we will be able to contribute ideas to adjustments that we need to make in the way that we approach the work we do as an early childhood education sector. And so as I close, I want to leave these with you. One, open minds and open hearts will open doors to learning. Certainly, if we have open minds over the next 2 days, and as we move beyond this forum into what you can do, what every single person here can contribute to this sector, then we will certainly open doors to learning. And it is the supreme art of the teacher to awaken joy in creative expression and knowledge. And we certainly know how important the joy and knowledge and play and development at this early stage is. And so we're encouraging you, we're challenging you to reinvent yourselves, to renovate your own approach to early childhood development so that we can achieve what is already available to us. It depends on us as long as we do what we need to do. And finally, to leave you with this question, what are you going to do? What would be your own phrase? What is your own inspiring quote from yourself, not from anybody else, not from a poem like we presented, but what is your own tagline, your own power line that you would live by in your professional life to achieve the changes that we need to as we start with this Education Leaders Forum, Early Childhood Education Leaders Forum over the next 2 days. Thank you so much for being here, for participating in this forum, and we wish you all the best over the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon, for that moving overview this morning. When you recited the poem, I must say, as a parent of 2 early childhood learners myself, I had chills. You definitely fit in the title of today's proceedings, which is to reflect, refocus, and renew. So we will indeed have open minds and open hearts because they will open doors to learning. It is now my honor to introduce to you Dr. Debbie Pashore, our keynote speaker. After Dr. Pashore, there will be a segment for audience reactions led by, or rather moderated by, Dr. Charmaine Christopher, ECE specialist at the Ministry of Education, Grenada. One moment, please, colleagues. Dr. Debbie Pashore has served as a public school teacher, consultant, principal, and social services administrator. She currently serves as a professor in the Department of Curriculum Studies at the University of Saskatchewan in Canada and dedicates much of her research, writing, and teaching to the role of parents in early childhood education. In her program of research, Dr. Pashore has engaged in narrative inquiries into parent engagement and leadership, a curriculum of parents and parent knowledge. In her undergraduate and graduate teaching, Dr. Pashore makes central and often absent or underrepresented conversation about the positioning of parents in relation to school landscapes. More recently, Dr. Pashore has spoken about the role of parents following the pandemic and learning at home during a crisis. Dr. Pashore, in collaboration with the Parent Engagement Collaborative, published a book entitled Portals of Promise, Transforming Beliefs and Practices Through a Curriculum of Parents, and a second book entitled Living as Map Makers. Currently writing a book that will present what a year-long plan for embedded parent engagement as a philosophy and a pedagogy could look like. Join me in welcoming as our keynote speaker, Dr. Debbie Pashore.
Thank you so much. I'm truly honored to be here with all of you, so many dignitaries in the room, so many special guests, and such an important agenda. Early childhood is a passion for me as well, and engagement of parents in that early childhood education is central to the work that I do. When Mrs. Simon challenges you to think differently, I hope I'll be able to do that as well. I want to talk with you about how we can envision our work in relationship and in collaboration with our parents at all stages and in all ways, so that we're not just doing this work alone, we're not doing it for children or for family, but we're doing it with them. So that all thing on, I'd like to be that obviously at the same time want to acknowledge my important treaty relationships and as well as my relationships to the indigenous people of this land. We're going to power your mission is so critical and so important. And again, thank you to all of you for being a part of this conversation and welcome me to the conversation as well. I'd like to begin with this quote from Dr. Stephen Hunt from the United States. When we do this work, I think it's so important that we calculate why is it important, why this focus and not another one. And he wrote in openings engaging every family. If we as educators could successfully teach all children themselves, then it's already done so. We heard the statistics that Mrs. Simon shared with us this morning. We're not there yet. We have much work to do. And typically we've tried to do that work alone. Well, into our centers, into our classes, our year-old settings, and we work with them there. But what we don't acknowledge is all work in home communities, all over the place with young children, and that work, the answer is pretty important. When we calculate here, if you think of our earliest children who do school time, when we calculate the amount of contact time they have with teachers, it only adds up to 17% a year. 17, that means 83% the children are growing, learning, living, loving in other places outside of our control. So if we're not engaging with that 83%, look at the opportunity. I encourage you to consider how is everything about early childhood education, about education and parents' side. This is a little stool, as you can see. I was a child in a rural part of Alberta, northern Alberta, in a farming community. And as a young girl, I milked a cow. And when I milked that cow, I sat on a small stool. It had 3 legs. It takes 3 legs to hold the stool: the child, the parent, and us as educators, all 3. And again, so often we look at us as children. We know the stool won't stand that way. We need that 3rd leg. And that's what the session is about today. There are 50 years of research in the field of parent engagement. 50 years, think about that. 5 decades of research that supports this work. We know from that research that parent engagement is one of the strongest predictors of children's success in early childhood education and all of their schooling, as well as life. So parent engagement, the meaningful, authentic role of parents in their children's teaching and learning, is one of the strongest predictors of success. How do we systematically, structurally, consciously build that into the work that we do. And why does it matter? Again, the research is really conclusive about the benefits. Think about that three-legged stool again: benefits for parents, benefits for children, and benefits for teachers. So we know that for children, it enhances educationally, socially, etc. All kinds of ways that kids benefit from their parents' engagement. There's benefits for parents too. So when parents are given a meaningful place and voice in their children's teaching and learning, they become more engaged, they play a more active role in the academics, and they gain confidence. They believe they can make a difference. They believe their presence matters, and what they do leads to their children's attainment of outcomes. So that's what we call efficacy, right? They have a greater sense that their place is important. And then really critically too is that they develop trust and relationships with educators. They begin to ask more questions. They begin to take more of a role. They begin to share their own thoughts and feelings. So really important piece when we get them very embedded in our system. What are the benefits for educators? So educators who have a strong relationship with parents have a lot stronger cultural competence, right? They know their families more, they understand them better, they're more able to reflect the cultural background of children and families in their classrooms. And whether that's diverse culture or whether it's an understanding of families living in complex contexts such as poverty or other challenges, they have that sense of respect, that sense of understanding of our families, and then they program differently. Teachers with good relationships with their families have less stress and burnout. The whole job is no longer theirs. Then the stress or the tension between families and schools is no longer there. So it becomes that joyous kind of relationship, that supportive relationship. And as a result of that, they stay in the field longer and they like their jobs more. They have more job satisfaction. I don't know about you, but in our early childhood, second influential person in shaping the field of curriculum, what we do and how we do it. One of the things that Schwab said is curriculum isn't just that document that lists outcomes or indicators. Curriculum has 4 what he called common places. So he said, the curriculum, a piece of the curriculum is the teacher. The curriculum comes through the teacher. It's interpreted by the teacher, right? What the teacher emphasizes, de-emphasizes, how that teacher presents the curriculum is critical. So it's not a neutral curriculum. And so understanding the beliefs and assumptions of the teacher, the disposition, the knowledge and skills is really critical. Obviously, the students are a critical common place as well. Who those children are, where they live, what their context is, matters. So again, how I might teach Indigenous children in Saskatchewan, Canada may be quite different than the context in St. Lucia, in the Dominican, etc. So we have to take that into consideration. Not all children are the same, and so we look at that complexity. We look at our subject matter. What is it we're wanting our children to be proficient in? The literacy, the numeracy, and so on. So those pieces, obviously it's not just what we do, but that sense of what we want our children to know and to gain. But finally, as well, what Schwab said is the milieus is the other commonplace. And when he talked about milieus, he talked about all of the contexts that shape a child's life. So it's their home, it's their community, their family, their church, the organizations they belong to or take part in outside of school. So with Schwab, he said that all four of these are interrelated, interdependent. No one is more important than any other. That we need them to be balanced, to be equitable, and to all be in play. What typically happens, though, is that our emphasis tends to be on teacher, student, and curriculum, our subject matter. Those are the things that we primarily talk about, think about. And when we look at our structures for early childhood education historically, that's where our emphasis has been. The milieus, equally as important, have often been neglected or disregarded. So what I'm going to share with you today is how do we begin to learn about children's milieus? How do we put ourselves in those milieus? And then how do we bring what we've gained from that learning into our settings and into the work that we do? One of the things that I think we have to do differently when we think about thinking differently, doing things differently, shifting our mindset, is so often we have thought about parents coming to us, parents bringing their children to us, parents engaging on our landscapes, and seeing ourselves as the center, our agenda, and our center as the agenda. How do we begin to shift that and say the way that we do our work is to go to our families, to go to our communities, to dwell with them in order to know them, in order to build programs with them, and in order to build programs that reflect them. So this notion of dwelling within comes from Michael Polanyi's work. Look at the date, 1958. Michael Polanyi wrote about personal knowledge a long, long time ago. And he said that to know something, we have to dwell within it. So he said, when you know music or you know art, you know mathematics, you experience it from the inside of it. So you intelligently contemplate it by immersing yourself in it. So what I'm arguing here is that to know our families, to truly be able to reflect them, their hopes and dreams for their children, their desires, their own knowledge in our programs, then we have to dwell with them in the places they reside. When we do that, what we're doing is we're shifting from caring stories of families to caring family stories. And this is work from professors at St. Francis Xavier University, and I know many of you are very familiar with them. A story of a family is a story from the outside. I think I know Sophia, this mom in this picture. I think I know her family. From the outside, I see her as a single mom. I see her as an immigrant. I see her as living in context of poverty. Those might be the things I see or the stories I carry of her. But when I dwell with her, when I go to her home, when I share with her in her coffee ceremony, when we sit together and she tells me who she is, what she believes in, what her journey has been. I then hold her family story. I know her the way she wants me to know her. I know her with more depth, more relationship, more complexity, more understanding. We stand together now side by side. I no longer stand apart from her or above her or away from her. So that sense of dwelling within gives us the sense of that connectedness, that sense of being able to collaborate that we're looking for. What it does is it gives us the opportunity to break down judgments, assumptions, stereotypes, biases, those kinds of things, again, that we may carry when we don't know families well, right? So we have a perception and it gets interrupted, it gets disrupted when we spend that time together. So what I'm saying is I think there's an importance that we learn from and with our families, not just about them, but from and with them. And when we do that, there's so many things that we have now available to us. And I'm going to talk about each of these. We access their funds of knowledge. I'll talk about what that means. We access their home culture. And we access their parent knowledge. So think of all the sources of information that inform our work as soon as we begin to dwell with our families. So what are funds of knowledge? This came out of the work of Malamonte, Neff, and Gonzalez in the southern United States. And they had said so often in our context in North America, we have very Eurocentric school structures, often reflective of white middle class values and not reflective of all the kinds of families that we have, the cultures, the communities. And so their work was really critically important in showing us that every family everywhere has a fund of knowledge, and that when we tap into that fund of knowledge, we see them as strength-based and capable, as having gifts, as having skills, rather than being lesser than the norm of the school. And so they defined funds of knowledge as that knowledge that accumulates over time. As you live your life, you accumulate knowledge. It's culturally developed because of who you are and where you live. And what it does is it enables you to have the knowledge and skills you need to be a well-functioning person in the world. I have a picture of my dad here. My dad is a farmer, a rancher, and this is his fund of knowledge. He knows horsemanship and farming and ranching. That's been his life story. We joke that he could ride a horse before he could walk. So just to give you an example of how funds of knowledge are distinct and unique from one place to another. There's also a sense of culture in the sense of big C culture, right? I'm Indigenous, I'm Canadian, I'm Caribbean, etc. But there's also culture in what I call a small C sense. It's a home culture. I have two sisters, there's three of us in my family, but each of us have a home culture that's very different from the other. And so when we talk about home culture, we're talking about the uniqueness or the particularity that a specific family has. It's their way of being and doing, right? This is my brother-in-law, Ian. He's British. My sister married someone from England. And you can see it's Christmas time and he's got one of those Christmas cracker hats on his head, right? That was something he introduced to us. It wasn't something that was part of our home culture, but something we began to do once Ian became a part of our family. So whether you have a Sunday family dinner at your dining table every Sunday, whether you have a special bedtime routine with your little ones, etc., those are our elements that define our home culture. So whether we are from a community as an early childhood educator, we often think we know people, but every one of us, until we spend time, has a home culture that might be invisible to us. And then there's parent knowledge, right? So there's funds of knowledge, those big broad funds of knowledge, but one particular fund of knowledge is the knowledge that a parent has of children. And it's only knowledge held by parents who nurture, care for children. And I'm not speaking just about biological parents. We know lots of people parent because of circumstances. But what parent knowledge is that knowledge that forms for a parent in that complex act of caring for kids in that complex place of a home, right? And so again, here our parent knowledge might be general. We learn that when we do errands, we can do 2 things before our little one needs a nap or a snack or a break, right? Those are things, routines, rhythms that we know as parents, that teachers know. But then there's the specific kinds of things that a parent or a grandparent, an auntie and uncle knows. My friend Vernon in this photo is holding his granddaughter. What does he know about her that none of the rest of us in our rooms could possibly know? He knows the people in her life who love her. He knows her medical history. He knows what soothes and calms her. He knows the language that she responds to. He knows what to do when she's upset. He has that particular parent knowledge from living alongside her that the rest of us don't have. So again, then, when we dwell with our families, when we dwell in community, those are things that become gains for us, the funds of knowledge, the home culture, and the parent knowledge. Now think how much richer we are in working with our children in our early childhood settings when we can add all of that to what we know. So I want to give you some examples. I know that you are leaders and not always the ones delivering the early childhood programs, but I truly believe that as leaders, if we don't believe this, neither will be the people who work with us or in our systems. If we don't have a clear picture that we can share with others about what this could look like, how will they know what it could look like? So one of the ways that teachers here learn from families is they make home visits. We call them relational home visits. They're there to meet each other, to build trust, to learn from one another. Teachers go into these settings as learners, as listeners. They ask the family to share stories. They ask the family to talk about their own educational experiences, to talk about their hopes and dreams for their child, to share what they do when the child isn't in school so they can see what all the other education the child's gaining is. And then they take that back into the classroom. Melanie, you can see in the middle photo, is a pre-kindergarten teacher. For us, that means she teaches 3- and 4-year-olds. And you can see she's also a white woman. And so she had set her beautiful classroom up with a little house center because she thought when children first come to school, it's important they have something familiar. In her house center, she had a table and chairs, the kinds of things that she would find in her own home. As she went to visit her families, many of whom are newcomers to Canada, from Syria, from Bangladesh, Muslim families, many of them from Ethiopia, Eritrea. She saw that in their homes, they didn't have table and chairs, that they had cloths on the floor or carpets or newspaper, and they set their food on the floor, and that's where they had their meal. She immediately went back to her early learning classroom. She took out the table and chairs. She put a blanket on the floor. She put cushions, and she had that environment reflect who her children are and what they knew. The kind of engagement then the children had was completely different. We often invite our families as a way for us to learn from them. We invite them to share artifacts from their home, from their lives, that represent stories of who they are, of things they value, or so on. Often we'll prompt that with a storybook. So we're modeling good literature, we're modeling rich language as well. The one in the middle is actually by an Australian author, Mem Fox. And in that book, Wilfred Gordon MacDonald Partridge, he's made friends with Miss Nancy. And he hears his parents say she's losing her memory. And so he goes around talking to people, what is a memory? And they tell him, oh, it's something warm. It's something from long ago. It's something that makes you laugh. It's something that makes you cry. It's something as precious as gold. So Wilfred puts this beautiful basket of things together and he takes them to Miss Nancy. He shares them so that she will remember. So we've used that as a way, for example, to know our families, to dwell with them. We'll share a story such as that one. We'll ask them to put together a basket of artifacts that are meaningful to them, like the one you see. And then we'll have them come together and share their baskets of artifacts, their bags, their boxes of things, and tell the stories of who they are. And the teacher learns from all of that and begins to, again, find ways in which she or he can create a culturally responsive, parent-rich program. So really powerful kinds of things to bring the lives of our kids and families into our classroom settings. Another way to learn from them. This is one some of our teachers started to use. They call them family chandeliers, another way to learn from families. Sometimes they'll do them in the classroom or center in non-COVID times, obviously. Other times they'll send wires home with explanations and they have the family do them at home. So the intention here is that every family creates one strand with beads, little items, shells, photos, words, flags, feathers, things that mean something to them. And they put together a strand that represents their family. Again, ideally, all of those stories are shared between and among to create a community within that classroom setting. So all that knowledge comes into the classroom. They attach, then each of them attaches that strand to whatever the teacher is used to hang them, and it creates what we're calling a family chandelier. The lives of the kids, the lives of the families, the knowledges they hold are present then in the very center of the classroom, and a constant reminder to the children and to the teacher what's central in the learning in that environment. So it keeps us starting with families rather than starting with our curriculum and trying to reflect families within that. So those are examples of learning from families. And then how do we learn with families too? What are some of the ways we can think differently, do things differently in order to bring our families into our centers, our classrooms, our schools? And so one of the teachers that I work with created a transition time. And so the first 15 minutes of every day for her is this transition time. You can see that in the background, she's got coffee, she's got tea. She invites families to come in with her and to linger, not to drop and run, but to stay. And so the families come in and she says to them, tell me about your child's evening. Is there anything you want me to know as we start the day today? She tells them about things she'll be doing in the classroom today. Home knowledge comes to the classroom. What she's working on goes to families so they can extend it and work with it later. So the acknowledgement here is that we are a team. We're doing this work together and that we need that flow backward and forward in order to make that happen. When parents are physically present in our classrooms and our centers, we learn from them and they learn from us. They see the way we read a book. They see the way we talk to children or solve a problem, and they enhance their own repertoire of skill. They enhance their own sense of efficacy in supporting their children's development. So again, it's that win-win situation. I love this example. One of our teachers builds her curriculum as much as she can out of the lives and the fabric of the families with whom she works. So she will often begin her year with a big idea Math lives everywhere. And that's how she starts her numeracy work. So she talks to the children about how math lives everywhere. And she asks them to think about where math lives in their life, in their lives. Where does it live in their families? Where does it live in their culture? Where does it live in their community? And she talks to parents about that too, same questions. And she invites the families then to gather things in their home to send to school that are math. And then as all of those items, ideas come into the classroom, she sorts those. She has the children sort those into learning bins. These are things about number. These are things about pattern. These are things about color. These are things about problem solving. And she builds her curriculum then out of the materials that they share. So here we see a little boy, his name is Laddie, and his father. They were from Nigeria. And you can see the dad's beautiful patterned shirt. So we learn about his culture and his country. We learn about their family and their beliefs, but also the math, the numeracy is unfolding at the same time as they explore the patterns in his shirt. He then was teaching them a game that they play and that he played as a child that they play in their family. And so again, in a natural and authentic way, he's sharing his funds of knowledge. As he teaches the kids the game, he shares his parent knowledge, and he's sharing his home culture, the culture in which Laddie's growing up. And so what was fun in this story, as the dad was playing this game and demonstrating this game to them, one of the children in the classroom said, "It's like an egg carton. An egg carton has that many spaces." And so all of the children then got egg cartons, painted them, and created their own game. And then they could take the game that Laddie's family plays home to their own family and teach it there. All the time, bridging home and school learning, enhancing numeracy, but in authentic and meaningful and culturally representative kinds of ways. We want to learn with our families by co-planning with them. We don't want to plan for them and invite them in. That's been our typical traditional kind of way of doing things. How do we begin to co-plan with them, to ask them to plan with us? So an example, one of our early years educators wanted to do some units and planning around celebrations. So rather than doing that herself, she invited parents to come in to have tea, to have cookies, and to say, what do you celebrate in your family? What do you celebrate in yours? What do you celebrate in yours? And then building together that unit around the things that were meaningful and important to families. So she had said, if I had planned it, we'd have celebrated birthdays, Easter, Christmas. But when she began to ask families what they celebrated, they included in their unit May Day, summer solstice, Eid, all kinds of things that the teacher didn't even know about. So she was the curricular expert. She knew the outcomes, she knew the indicators, the assessment strategies, the instructional strategies. So she brought that. But parents brought alongside that their knowledge of the holidays. And when they came in and shared them and brought artifacts, it was a natural way for them to be parents alongside their children, sharing their knowledge. We need that co-planning because when we ask them what they want for their children, right, it gives us direction. We can often, and always, I would argue, reach our curriculum outcomes using the materials that they provide us. We also can support families and children differently when we know what they want. So I did a 3-year project at a school with the early years grades, a parent engagement, systematic parent engagement project. And we began that project by saying to parents, we held a parent forum, we invited them in, we had a meal, we talked to them and said, if the school could do more for you than we typically do, what would it be that you wanted? So what would you want for your children? What would you want for your family? And what would you want for yourself as a parent or as an adult. And as we listened to them, as we heard them, we thought, okay, how do we enact these? How do we put these kinds of things in place? And so what you'll see, we ended up working in 3 ways, and I'm not going to do a lot of depth, but I just wanted to show you what happens when we ask parents and follow their lead. So they wanted more of a role for themselves on the school landscape, ways they could come into the school, into this early years education, and play a role. They wanted more things for their families, their children outside of school times. So things that they could engage with after school, on weekends, in the summer. And they wanted to grow themselves. So they wanted to enhance their English language. They wanted to get credentials like food safe certificates so that they could improve their employment. We know that the stronger a family, that the stronger the parents are, the stronger the kids will be as well. So one way to enhance outcomes for our young learners is to enhance outcomes for their parents. And so this is where collaboration was initially with the parents. That's our core audience, our families, but then branched out. So for example, you will see that in the first pillar, you'll see the words family gathering place. They wanted a place in the school where they could be, that was comfortable for them, safe for them, inviting, and where they could have parent sessions and so on. So that began with, they wanted to talk about some things in relation to raising their children. So then we reached out into community to some of our not-for-profit organizations that support families and said, could you facilitate informal conversations in a family gathering place? So how we began to include other agencies, other sectors, other support systems, introducing our families to those. In the second pillar, you'll see they wanted a family library. They wanted it not just during the day, but in other times and places too. So we added toddler books to our library. We added teen books to our library. We added adult literature to our library. And that was all through a relationship with our public library system. They gave us books. Librarians came in and did storytelling and so on. They facilitated activities. So we began to create a wider web. It didn't become our work. It became our work to connect, to collaborate with other organizations that could wrap themselves around our families. And you'll see that in the third pillar as well. So we have an organization called the Open Door Society that began doing language conversation circles for parents. We started offering opportunities for them to get, as I said, their food safe certificates and so on. So we begin with the family. They are our core collaborators. And through what they tell us, what they ask for, we can branch that out into networks of support and relationship in other ways as well. So what I'm talking about, and you heard that in the introduction, I call this a philosophy and pedagogy of walking alongside. Historically, at least in Canada, we've had very colonial systems with hierarchies of knowledge. Teacher as expert, parents on the outside. So very much what we're working to do is say teachers are holders, our early childhood educators are holders of great knowledge of children teaching and learning. We do not want to downplay that. But at the same time, working in isolation, they're not going to achieve what we need them to do. So when we bring our parents alongside, also holders of knowledge of children and teaching and learning, now look at how much knowledge we have to work with. Now look at how much expertise. Now we're not just touching the few hours the children are with us, we're touching all aspects of their lives. We're doing it with respect, we're doing it with reciprocity. We're seeing our parents as strength-based, as capable, as significant. And we're bringing those milieus into play. It's no longer just teacher, student, subject matter. We're using that full circle of curricular commonplaces. that Schwab says is so very important. So that piece, I think we have, all of us, outside of our early learning centers, our early learning classrooms, we have an absolutely huge untapped resource with our parents and our families. And when we bring that in, we grow, our children grow, and our parents grow. And again, we're getting that broader effect than we can get on our own. So again, just my contact information, places you'll find more information about these topics if they're of interest to you. And I'm really excited to hear your comments and your questions and to respond to you in whatever way I can.
Dr. Cooper, thank you so much for this presentation. It was such an enlightening, inspiring, and powerful presentation. Educators across the island, let's show our appreciation for Dr. Cooper. Thank you so much. What an important subject, what an important area, what an important topic. Such an important topic for our educators today. Educators, we have gotten so much today from Dr. Pusher. I want us to reflect, and I hope you are taking notes as you would have listened to this presentation today. There is so much for us as early childhood educators. So my task today is to open the floor or give you the opportunity so that you can share. It's your opportunity to reflect on what was said, and we are giving you an opportunity so that you can share, respond to this presentation, this powerful presentation this morning. So across the member states, you will be given that opportunity. You can make a comment or you can ask a question. Dr. Pusher is still here with us, and so she will be able to respond to your comments or your questions. So this is your opportunity. I want everyone to feel free to make a comment or ask your question. Now, I want you to keep in mind that we have about 15 minutes to do just that. So I would like you, as quickly as possible, if you have a comment or you have a question, to do just that as quickly as you can. So, educators, this is your opportunity. Before, as we do not have anybody indicating wanting to ask a question or comment, I just want to highlight some key points that I noted from the presentation. And I think that might encourage us more to make our comments or to ask our questions. I want to first start with a quote that was highlighted there in the presentation from the Global Family Research Project. Parent engagement is one of the strongest predictors of children's success in both school and life. I want to repeat this quote. Parent engagement is one of the strongest predictors of children's success in both school and life. Another key point that came out from the presentation, and I will just highlight one or two. Acknowledge. It's important as educators, we acknowledge the work being done by families and the community. We have to acknowledge what is being done. Importantly, also highlighted in the presentation, educators. Sometimes I think we focus on how parent engagement can benefit the child and the parent. But Dr. Kushar highlighted also the educators, how educators benefit. Educators who have strong engagement with families, with parents. There are some points that Dr. Kushar highlighted there. Have increased cultural competence, have less stress and burnout, support from parents, working with parents, stay in the field longer, express greater job satisfaction. Wow, such powerful points that we all need to take note of. Because sometimes I think we look, as educators, we look at more the benefits for the students and the parent, but what about the educator? All right. One other point I would like to highlight while you think about your comment or question is dwelling within. Dwell within. Dwell with the family. Know the family story. Learn from the family and with the family. I want to repeat this. Learn from the family and with our family. Sometimes we learn a little from them. When we dwell with the family, there are great gains. When we take the family, there are great gains. And I just want to highlight those. It's added to what knowledge that we already know. Funds of knowledge, home culture, parents' knowledge of the children. So educators, how important it is that we as educators need to take the time to dwell with the families. So I'm going to stop here after highlighting those points. And I would, Dominica is on. Dominica, can we hear your comment or question?
Good morning, everybody. Let me just thank Dr. Pusher for such a profound, substantive presentation. We are well aware that within the various cycles of education, parent enthusiasm is present at the commencement of the cycle. So for instance, our parents would be enthusiastic at the entry point in K, at the entry point of grade 1, at the entry point at the secondary level Form 1, and probably even when the students are on their way to writing the grade 6 national assessment in many territories. So the challenge for the school system, I guess now, is how do we maintain that enthusiasm? Because we are perfectly correct in saying that the parents come with interest, yeah, when they register the students. So how do they lose that interest, and at what point do they lose that interest? That's a reflective question for us during our deliberation. What can we do as systems to maintain the sort of enthusiasm that they come in with when they bring the students to us? So I think that is where we need to probably focus on how do we capture and sustain that sort of interest that they have. Yeah, thank you.
I'm having quite a bit of difficulty hearing. I don't know if you're able to recap that or it's not coming through the mic system. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm going to try another one. Can you hear me now?
It's better.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Right. So we were just looking at the interest and enthusiasm of parents, and we were indicating that at the entry points of the various cycles of education, that is at pre-K, at K, and at early secondary level, we tend to see a really intense level of enthusiasm of our parents. They come in with the interest, they work with the school system, but at some point along the cycle, they lose that interest. And I was just suggesting that it's a reflective question for us as educators. What causes the parent to lose the interest, and can we sustain and maintain the enthusiasm that the parents obviously come with when they register the students with us? So that's something just for pondering upon. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that. I think I caught it this time. I think there's a couple of things that happen that cause parents to disengage, and I think there's a couple of things that are important for us to think about. When we look at the research on parent engagement, the impact of the parents' engagement is when the parents are engaged with their child's teaching and learning. It isn't about them engaging with us as educators or with the school so much, but in the teaching and learning itself. So for example, we may have parents we never see in our early learning classrooms or our early learning centers, but they're at home reading to their children, they're baking, they're gardening, they're working on the farm, they're engaged in cultural ceremony. And so those children are still benefiting from their parents' engagement. So we've typically had quite a school-centric view. We count the numbers of parents that come or the people who sign agenda books and so on. But the real impact comes from their engagement with their child, wherever that happens. And it comes from their setting of high expectations. So William James has done a number of meta-analyses in this area. He has a new one out, and it's still confirming it's parents' expectations of their children that make the largest difference. So how do we promote parents' engagement with their child at home or in out-of-school times and places? That's as important as their engagement with us, more important. The second thing is that I think we have a lot of myths about high school and myths about teens, right? So all the time we say, oh, kids don't want their parents engaged. They wouldn't want their parent to be engaged. What I learned raising 3 boys of my own is they want you. They just want you in a specific way, right? They don't want me sitting in their high school math class, but they want me to care about what they're doing. They want me to know what they're doing. They want me to ask questions. They want me to have conversations. So I think what we have to learn is how does parent engagement shift in what it looks like over time. I want to give you an example. There's a wonderful high school teacher here whom I'd worked with. And one of the challenges I posed to the teachers in my graduate education classes was plan a project and engage parents. And Brett said to me, Debbie, I'm a high school English teacher. How am I supposed to do that? And I said, well, keep working on it, keep thinking. We played with ideas. Brett established this wonderful process. So you know how you do novel studies in high school English? Instead of it being a novel study in the classroom, he created parent-teen book clubs. So he gave a choice of books to his students and families. They picked a novel they wanted to read. A parent read it, the student read it, and then he created all these wonderful possibilities for them as they went along to talk about the book. So their first check-in was, tell us what book you chose and why. Tell me how you're planning to read that book and talk with each other about it. Another check-in, he said to them, find a passage in the book independently. The student finds one, the parent finds one. Find a passage in the book that resonates with you. You think it reflects your family values. And then find one that doesn't, and then get together as parent and student and talk about that. The kids loved the project. The parents were over the moon about the project because they said it's given us an entrance into our children's learning. We've been cut off from it. As they get older, I don't know what they're doing anymore, right? And so it gives me a window into my child's learning, and it gives me the opportunity to engage. So I think the responsibility is ours as educators to challenge our assumptions and beliefs, to challenge some of the myths around parent engagement, and to find ways to creatively invite parents into the teaching and learning that's authentic and meaningful. Not asking a parent to be a teacher, but asking a parent just to be a parent alongside their child. So I hope I've caught what you wanted, and I hope that responds a little bit to it.
St. Vincent. St. Vincent.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rochelle Tanis. I'm a early childhood supervisor from the Beckwith Anglican Early Childhood Center. And I wanted to make a comment on the part that you spoke about learning with the parent and learning from the parent. I think that is very important, as you stated, because we know that it's not always that we have children who may be able to express themselves. So especially when we're trying to assess them as educators, you're wondering where they're at, if they're learning what you're trying to teach them. But then being able to speak with the parents at home, knowing what they're doing at home, knowing what the children talk about at home with their family. Sometimes they open up more and they talk about things that they do at school while they may not speak to us directly as the teachers. So having that relationship would also help us to understand the child more and learning how the parent works along with the child at home and developing that kind of the bridge for us to know how to reach out to that children, especially a shy child who, you know, might not be able to open up and express themselves more. So it is really important for us to know how we're learning from the parents, as well as I'm speaking a little bit from my experience. We've had parents in the past who would come into the school and sort of act as a co-teacher, especially when we started our home garden. We would have parents who know about gardening coming in and work with us with the setting up the garden, having the children learn about how to garden, how to use the tools, what we have to look for, things like that. So we can use our parents' knowledge, the particular skills that they may have, and help us to, you know, have that extra skills, the extra teachers, so to speak, to come into the schools. And, you know, the